Stage race mountain biking is arguably one of the biggest drivers of the sport in South Africa, and as a result, 90% of the mountain bikers out there are dead set on riding the fastest marathon bikes that money can buy. The reality, however, is that there is very often a large skills deficit when it comes to owning one of these race machines and actually being able to ride one of them fast. Well, we're here to challenge the idea that you need to be on one of these Olympic level race machines if you want to ride a marathon distance event, be fast, or have a good time. In order to demonstrate our thinking, Dale and I have teamed up to ride the F&B Wines to Wales, which is a 3-day mountain bike stage race, where I rode the 2019 Cannondale Scalpel SI Carbon 4, and it is of course a race machine, and Dale rode the new Cannondale Habit, which is an all-round trail bike.
Let's take a look at these bikes by kicking off with the Cannondale Habit. But first, a disclaimer. The bike we tested is the Habit Carbon 1, but the Habit that's available in South Africa is the Habit Carbon 3. What's the difference between the two? The frame geo is exactly the same. The only thing that changes is the build spec. So what are we talking in terms of geometry? I rode a large frame which boasts the following numbers. Head angle of 66 degrees, a reach of 460 mils, seat tube angle of 74.5, a chainstay length of 435 millimeters, and a wheelbase of 121 centimeters. What do these numbers mean, and how do they translate into the ride quality and characteristics? So let's talk about climbing. Trail bikes aren't typically known for their climbing ability, but I'm happy to report that the Habit is no slouch when it's pointed uphill. I found myself using the lockout switch every now and then, especially for those steep, long uphills, but in general it was riding fully open with no need to fiddle with the shock. So once you've worked yourself all the way to the top of that hill, it's time to talk about the fun part, which is the descending ability of the bike. In this case, the bike's got 140 mil travel up front and 130 on the rear, so descending is ultimately its main focus and where it performs best. The mix of modern geometry and a light, agile carbon frame makes for a fun, playful platform. That being said, the bike's still super stable and planted with a slacker head angle, which means steep switchbacks or rocky sections were an absolute breeze. It also inspires confidence on those super high-speed Jeep track descent sections, especially when you're following this guy who's a bullet downhill.
It's just because I'm so fat.
The bike's got a low BB height and a relatively short chainstays. That makes it feel like it's cornering on rails. Just watch out for those tree stumps or you may end up taking an unexpected swim like I did.
I love that. That was my best part of the whole race.
Right there.
Playful is the word that comes to mind when describing the suspension feel. It's nice and progressive, making the bike sit higher in the travel, but also gives you the ability to pop over obstacles with ease. It isn't, however, the most plush feeling suspension platform, but that isn't really what you want with a truly all-round trail bike. So how does Cannondale summarize the Habit? Well, they call it a trail bike with its priorities straight. Progressive design, playful agility, and killer capability, all in the name of fun. I'd say that's a perfect description. The bike is fun, fast, agile, and is truly a bike that can hold its own on a gnarly trail or a long-distance stage race.
Well, one thing is for sure, you certainly look to be having the time of your life out on those trails. You're like popping off everything you possibly could and sharpening through corners. So no doubt that the Habit is a bike of choice for you. It's now my turn, and for this particular event, as I said earlier on, I decided to jump on the Cannondale Scalpel SI Carbon 4. Being 2 meters tall is obviously quite a challenge, so I had to go with the extra large frame. That being said, I was a little bit concerned about only having 100 mils of travel across the shock and of course the nifty lefty Osho, but boy oh boy, was I pleasantly surprised. Before we get into that though, let's take a look at the numbers. So this XL frame boasts the following numbers. It's got a head angle of 69.5 degrees, a reach of 466, which might be, in I would say modern terms, slightly short for a marathon bike, but I certainly found it roomy. I was running 100 mil stem though. Seat tube angles at 73.5, chainstay length at 435 millimeters, a wheelbase of 116.9 centimeters, and a suspension, of course, I've highlighted already as 100 mils of travel both up front and at the back. So let's break this bike down even further. So let's be real, I'm not a natural climber, so when a bike makes me feel like a champion on the climbs, then the design team have managed to get something right, that's for sure. I found that when I stood up to get going, be it over a punchy little climb or a trail feature, the bike responded instantly. One of the aspects that surprised me the most about this bike though, was how it just never broke traction. Even on the really loose and rocky stuff, it simply surged forward. As much as I enjoyed the climbs on the Scalpel, which is something that you would never really hear me say, as in enjoying the climbs, I have to admit that descending is a lot more my thing. It's simple physics really, plus I've got a lot of weight behind me. As noted earlier, I was a little bit apprehensive about how 100 mils of travel would accommodate my weight and how the bike would handle as a result. In line with that, I spent a fair amount of time adjusting my suspension setup before the race. Simply put, I was impressed by how well the bike performed. Somehow, the suspension had a responsive but almost bottomless feel to it, which made it a real confidence booster. With that confidence, I found that I could really attack the single tracks, and that translated into one hell of a good time. I found the bike to be incredibly responsive and playful, which makes sense considering the bike's lightweight and frame rigidity. Previous generations of the Scalpel have had the reputation of perhaps being a little bit twitchy, but the Scalpel SI4 was predictable and stable at high speeds. There were a few surprise features here and there out in the trails that had me a little bit worried at times, but the bike just sucked it up and got me through. As stable as the bike is, it's super nimble through the corners and allows you to carry some really great speed. One thing that caught me a little bit by surprise was this bike's acceleration. It is a World Cup race machine after all. Simply put, it was like a rocket ship really. This is most noticeable on the climbs, and when you really have to put power down, this made for some great pedaling efficiency too. So how does Cannondale summarize the Scalpel? They say the Scalpel is an exciting, exacting XC racing bike designed to conquer the aggressive terrain of modern World Cup courses. Well, in my view, they've nailed it on this one. The overall riding impression was great and I had loads of fun on it. I never felt exposed, felt stable in the high speed stuff, and when it came to the climbs, well, I could at least keep up with Dale. So with all of this being said, how do these bikes play into the overall purpose of this experiment? Remember, the one where we challenged the idea that you have to be on an Olympic level race bike if you want to ride a marathon distance event, be fast and have a good time? Simply put, we think that it's actually not about the bike. It's about you and what you want to do and what you want to achieve. In saying that, it takes a certain level of honesty with oneself when it comes to choosing which bike to ride.
The reason being is that there's a lot of social influence and pressure and loads of information out there that forms a part of your decision-making process in deciding which is the right bike for you. Our observation is that most South African riders don't have the skill set to get the most out of these ultimate racing machines, ourselves included. Sure, we're all working towards that point, but we need to accept the reality that we might not be there yet.
So with all of this in mind, the Cannondale Habit is a bike that ticks all of the boxes in that it provides a platform on which to learn, improve your technical riding skills, and to do so in a way that makes you feel confident and safe. That in itself is a game changer. Once you've mastered your craft on a bike like the Habit, the transition onto a rocket ship like the Scalpel will be that much more exhilarating, plus you'll have the skill set to match. Our verdict is simple. Choose a bike that works for you, have as much fun as you possibly can, and then move on to things as you progress as a rider.
Totally agree. Couldn't agree more.
And we had pretty testing conditions out there, I must say, at Wines to Wells. So if there was a place to test these rigs, it was definitely in those conditions at that event.
For sure, for sure. That's 100%.
All in all, we had a great time. If you enjoyed this episode, thank you so much for tuning in. Give us a subscribe, give us a like, and we look forward to seeing you for the next one. Cheers for now.